Welcome to Therapy Inspired podcast. As therapists, we have a unique view of the world. We hold a space for grief and trauma, and yet we also get to witness resilience and healing, all while being human ourselves. We hope to share helpful psychoeducation with our insights from our world as psychotherapists. And now a disclaimer. We'll be talking about things related to therapy. However, listening or engaging with this podcast does not equate to a therapist-client relationship. And while we may discuss insights from working with various clinical issues, we don't reference specific cases. Hi, my name is Darby Crosby, and the name of my practice is Crosby Counseling and Wellness. I offer virtual, online, secure counseling to individuals, couples, and families. I also supervise practicum students as well and clinicians. Kameela?
Osman, and I'm a registered social worker and psychotherapist. My practice is elite counseling and consulting. I do in-person therapy in Bowmanville, as well as virtual therapy throughout Ontario. And today on Therapy Inspired, we're talking about common mindset challenges. In the last few sessions, we've delved into the power of our thoughts and the way our thoughts shape our reality, as well as the impact of our self talk, our self criticism, perfectionism. And in the last episode, we were talking about cognitive distortions that can keep us trapped in unhelpful thinking patterns. Today, we're continuing on this journey, exploring the more common mindset challenges that we can face. So let's dive into these common mindset challenges and explore practical strategies to overcome them. We're excited to share insights that can help you shift your perspective and create a mindset that supports your goals and well-being.
And whether or not you're struggling to trust your own instincts, avoiding risks that can lead to growth, or just being paralyzed by fear of failure, feeling overwhelmed by life's demands, or struggling with planning and organization, these challenges, these hurdles can hold us back in our personal and professional lives. But the good news is we can recognize these habits and we can address them and overcome these mindset barriers. So we're going to unlock some possibilities as we move forward to offer greater opportunities for confidence and clarity. So the first one we're going to talk about is by believing others. So often, if you have a great idea, you say, this is what I'm going to do. And people will say, really? You're going to do that? Why? And so sometimes their comments to us impact us and help us to sort of lead us to self-doubting ourselves and hindering our decisions to move forward. So I think it's really important that when we have an idea, that we create it in a way that feels good to us, that we can feel good, we can be confident about it. We may have some doubts, but again, we're supporting ourselves and being really sure that this is what we're going to do, and only share those ideas with people who will be supportive and are like-minded in nature. It also helps if we spend a few minutes each day sort of reflecting on where we're going, what our decisions are, and how we can sort of go to the next step, how we can make our vision meet with our values and our instincts. And over time, what that does is it helps us to know that we are making good decisions, and it doesn't matter what other people say. Also, self-affirmations. It's really important to do self-affirmations because that helps us to sort of give us confidence. It's sort of like we're being our own cheering section, right? I can trust my instincts. I am capable of making good decisions. I can do this are very powerful statements of encouragement that will boost us moving forward.
Yeah. I often say that the unhelpful thoughts, especially if there's self-doubt, can be so automatic. That's where, affirmations to reaffirm what do you want to believe? How do you start creating a pathway in the brain for those helpful messages instead of letting the unhelpful messages be so automatic and kind of insidious in our mind? create that other pathway so that when we are trying to create a challenge for the unhelpful thoughts, we notice that we're stuck in it, but we don't know how to come out of it. We've used the affirmations and our brain can almost like switch tracks
Mhm.
to those affirmations. It can be really powerful to practice them even when you don't need it, not just as an alternate thought, but practice it in the morning and reaffirm those messages to yourself. Practice it before you go to bed and reaffirm those messages to yourself.
Yeah. And the next topic we want to sort of talk about was very similar. It's the fear of failure. Like sometimes we want to do things, but we're afraid that we don't have the skills, or we're not going to be able to do it, or we're not going to be successful. And that sort of paralyzes us from sort of moving forward. I know some of my colleagues, for example, when they were starting their private practice, they didn't want to build their website, or they didn't want to post their website until it was absolutely perfect. But the reality is that it doesn't have to be perfect. Get it out there, then you can sort of look at it. You can make some subtle changes as you go on, but at least it's out there, because it takes a while for Google to figure out your website's up, right? So again, I think it's important for us to sort of look at what we're preventing ourselves from doing, right? Take note of things that we're fearful of. And then, like Kameela was just saying, even use positive affirmations to push us beyond that point. And to learn from our mistakes, right? So, oh, I shouldn't do that website. But then I do it and it's okay. And I said, see, that fear wasn't necessary.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, I think one of the things that comes up is even fear of taking risks or fear of dreaming because of that fear that there is going to be that failure. And so sometimes we stay in that comfort zone. We stay stuck with, the things that we think we know we're really good at, and we're not chancing, going after the things we really want. One of the ways that you can challenge the fear of failure and even risk taking is to do a bit of like a failure journal. What are the things you think you failed at or you felt like you didn't do well? And then reflect on how did it actually serve you? So you're creating that reframe. You're looking for what were the possibilities? What were the opportunities that came from something you thought was a failure? I thought, I tried out for my little guys trying out for the basketball team were interested in it, tried out for the basketball team and I didn't make it. What did you learn from that? You got that opportunity. It's the first time you're trying out for something. And then, maybe you practice some more and you try again next year. And then the opposite with fearing of dreaming. I don't want to dream that I could possibly, maybe I'll stick with the idea of like making a team because you don't want to be disappointed. And so all of that's wrapped up in the idea of fearing failure. To normalize dreaming, sometimes we can, as an exercise, we can create a vision board, start thinking about what are the things you want, and start believing that that's a possibility instead of thinking that I can't possibly have that. The more we normalize thinking about the things that we want, we almost start connecting with it, seeing that's a possibility. If someone tells us, or we tell ourselves either or that something isn't possible, I'm going to stick with that analogy again. You're not going to make the basketball team, where you're too short or whatever it might be. We're going to believe that, or if we're telling ourselves that, we're going to limit our choices. If we can, envision ourselves, I see myself there. I see myself, practicing, or I see myself trying out and doing well. I see myself, excelling in whatever it might be, doing a speech or that sort of thing. You're going to be more confident and embody that confidence. And so that's where, things like vision boards may seem a little bit like woo science, but that's where it actually does come back to psychology that we do know. When we have thoughts, it changes the chemicals reactions in our body. It shifts our feelings and it shifts our behaviors, our choices. We're more likely to go after choices and opportunities if we believe them as possibilities. days. Another challenge that goes along with that is to do a 30-day challenge with yourself. Pick one of the things, if you do that vision board, for example, pick one of the things that you want to go after and, start with small steps. What are some small steps towards that that you can focus on? So it's one goal for the 30 days that you're taking smaller steps. So in this week, I'm going to do these three things that move me closer to that goal. So it's not just about dreaming and thinking it's going to happen, but dreaming and taking that intentional action towards those dreams. You create the possibilities.
And I think that brings us to the next sort of similar thought, is that I think that there is a truism about fearing success, right? And I think that sometimes, I know this was much more present in females. I hate to be sexist, sorry. Like 25 years ago, when women were still sort of working their way up the ladder of success in corporations. Like, what does that mean if I'm more successful than my partner? What does that mean if I am an incredible CEO in terms of who I am as a parent?
Mhm.
We need to look at these sort of core messages that we tell ourselves or believe about ourselves so that we can soar and do all the things that we want to do. It's very similar to the 30-day challenge. Let's take baby steps to get to where we want to go,
Yeah.
right? And not allow people to tell us that we shouldn't, mothers shouldn't be CEOs, or, like whatever the messaging is.
Mhm.
We need to be able to reflect and do those things that we dream about, that we want to do, because we have a right to succeed.
Yeah, yeah. I do see that. I think the gender example is one piece, but I also do see that sometimes culturally, if
Mhm.
we grew up in a financially precarious situation, or again, there are things that culturally we do, we think as we don't do, or we haven't been exposed to. There can be that fear of stepping out of that fear of succeeding in that way. How will people look at that? Or if I have that income, it's going to go in a different way, or my life is going to change in a certain way that I'm not going to be able to cope with it. That it comes back to fear as that basis, fear and anxiety that can set in, and so challenging ourselves when we notice these things. The other common mindset challenge that I find we face sometimes is just general overwhelm. And overwhelm when we're taking on lots, or if we have, sometimes it's taking on, and sometimes it's what's going on in our world, it can lead to burnout. It can lead to a sense of feeling stuck. And so we go into that, perhaps you've heard of fight or flight. Sometimes we go into fight or flight, and sometimes we freeze, and we get stuck in not knowing what to do next. And so one of the things with when we, and this is more simplistic just for the purposes of covering this here, you could probably do a series of episodes on just overwhelm, but a simple way of looking at overwhelm is to think of what's the priority, what's the main thing we need to be focusing on versus taking on everything at once. Instead of everything at once, can we use mindful prioritization to think of what are the top things I need to be looking at today? And of those top things, what is the first thing? So it's one step at a time. And then we're also looking at what are the non-essentials. So there are lots that we can do in a day, but do we need to do it all? And do we need to do it all right now? Likely not. Strategy that I find helpful for that is to think of time blocking. And so time blocking is to chunk out a bunch of, not a bunch of, a time period. It can be a 20-minute or an hour. What's that time period that you're going to chunk out to work on one task or a part of the task? So with that, and why I like time blocking is it's progress instead of completion. Often we will say, I'm thinking from my lens as a mom, I might say, I don't have time to clean the whole bathroom, or I don't have time to clean the whole living room, but I can maybe do a vacuum right now. I can, do whatever I can do in that 20 minutes. So maybe it's that vacuum and, fixing the pillows and those sorts of things. Maybe it's part of the work, but not the whole room. And so that time blocking allows us to make some progress and then move on. So we feel we get a sense of accomplishment without feeling like we're that far behind, and having the overwhelm start to compound on top of each other.
And that leads us into like planning, like what do we need to do this week? What are the essentials? What are the sort of medium things? What are the things that maybe we can put off till next week if necessary? So sometimes if we just carry everything in our head, we don't have a clear vision. Like Camilla, you were just saying, like, you don't need to clean the whole living room, just vacuum today. Like, so this way we can sort of plan on what we're going to do. We can get a little bit organized. We can break things up into smaller pieces. And we can be proud of what we've done, even if it's just vacuum, right? I mean, and if you are a family, then it is also about sitting down one day a week, whether it's Sunday or another day, and saying, what does everybody want to do this week? What are the important things? Where do we have to go? Who drives who where? Like, what are the priorities? I have a project that I have to get out by the end of the week. So that means somebody else has to do more stuff so that I have the time to do it. And if we plan this and we structure these goals and everybody understands and we're all on sort of the same page, then people don't start to pull at you like, Mom, you need to help me do this. If everybody knows that mom has to work on something, then everybody knows that that's what happens. And we need to depend on dad or the partners or whatever. Also, I think, it's important that when we are trying to do tasks or large tasks or look at a plan, I think we need to sort of create goals. And there's a technique called SMART goals, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And this way, what we can do is we can sort of create a goal that we can sort of work on, even using that chunking, that time management piece in order to get through it. And then at the end of the week, we can feel like we've accomplished a whole bunch of stuff instead of, feeling like we spun our wheels the whole time. And planning doesn't have to be 9:15, I'm going to do this. It can just be in the morning, I'm going to do this. But at least you have a direction and a focus of what you're going to do in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see lots of couples that end up in clashes, as you say, around that piece. I thought we were going to do this for the weekend, and somebody else had something else on their mind for the weekend. And so that planning session, whether it's even if you're single and you're doing that for yourself, so you've got a framework of what you're doing, it can be helpful. But it does reduce conflict and prepare communication when it comes to family planning, whether it's just a couple or a couple with one or more kids. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about different sort of mindset challenges, and I hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.